Welcome back to Zoom In. Now we continue with today's top story here as we look at the security situation around Israel and certainly in reference to the conflict with the Palestinians. We are joined now for some more in-depth discussion by Sinijlawi, Fatah activist from Jerusalem and as well the chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund. Thank you very much for being with us, Samar. And joining us here in the studio as well is former IDF Colonel of Military Intelligence, Dr. Jacques Neria. Thank you both for being with us. Samar, I come to you first in Jerusalem here to a real broad question on we're seeing the apparent flare-up now in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Why is it happening at this moment?
Well, the weather is there. So when
I may have lost the audio on you, Summer. I'm not sure if we're having some technical trouble. Well, come back in the studio here to Jacques Summer. We'll come back to you in just a minute. A little technical issue to sort out. But Jacques, same question to you. Is what appears to be the moment? What conditions are right now for seeing the flare-up we're seeing?
Well, you know, there has been I would say a revival of terrorism led first by the Islamic State, which was unexpected in Israel. It was quite a surprise. And then, you know, the other Palestinian factions the rival factions had to prove that they were the ones who are present on the ground. So we had a series of attacks. And now, I mean, we are in the midst of a very sensitive months from the Palestinian point of view, from the Israeli point of view, I mean, let's say from the Muslim, from the Jewish and from the Christian point of view, and add to it also celebrations concerning several memorial days in Israel, and the Shoah Day, and then you have the Independence Day. All this mix gives you a mix that is, compared to or parallel to a sort of barrel of explosive. We're all sitting on it, and Jerusalem with 1 square kilometer is the most sensitive place in the world. If you move 1 stone in Jerusalem, then the whole world resounds about what's going on here. And beyond all that, there's the constant policy of Hamas, who wants to incite the population and to replace the Palestinian Authority. So how do they replace the Palestinian Authority? By proving that the Palestinian Authority has no control on what's happening in East Jerusalem and in the territories. And this is the equation. The equation is very complex, very complicated. But and finally, the final thing is that at the end of the day, we all suffer from the present situation.
Let's come back to Samar now. I think we've fixed some of the technical issues there. Samar, essentially this first question of what's the underlying reason, but I'll put something else out there. We've seen so much focus on Al-Aqsa right now, on the events in the old city of Jerusalem here. Tens of thousands of people, Muslim worshippers, have come and gone peacefully from Al-Aqsa over the last weeks here, but a handful of a few hundred have stuck around at times to riot and clash with Israeli police. Are they hijacking a situation similar to what Jacques is describing, or is there a bigger underlying issue taking place right now? How do you describe it?
Well, there is a serious fear among most of the Palestinians, and now it's becoming among most of the Arabs and Muslims, that there is some kind of a plan to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the building, and replace it by the Jewish temple. Whether this plan is among a few people or small organizations or not, but it's getting a lot of publicity. It's there. There are the design of the new temple. There are organizations on the website, on the social media that is calling for the replacement of the Dome of the Rock with the Jewish building, with the Jewish temple, and this is creating a fear. People, Al-Aqsa is a very sensitive nerve. You cannot touch it. It's a powder bag, a gunpowder bag, and we are keep testing it with fire. It will explode, and it keeps exploding. This is a lesson that does not need to be learned anymore. It's obvious to everybody. So the motivation among people, the fear is real. Nobody is predicting it. Yes, some organizations like Hamas is trying to put some few flags every now and then everybody gets the impression that Hamas is controlling everything in Al-Aqsa. It's not true. Nobody is controlling anything on Al-Aqsa. The people are connected by nature to this homicide, not only Palestinians, but also Arabs and Muslims. I don't think there is any other Friday prayer where 100,000 or 200,000 people come together. So each Friday prayer in Ramadan is the biggest Friday prayer in the whole Arab and the whole Islamic world. So this is something serious, taking into consideration that the connectivity between Palestinians and Al-Aqsa is not easy. There are still restrictions, there are still blockage, there are still checkpoints, and
along those lines,
with a lot of.
I want to bring up something. There's been a lot of discussion, and Jacques, to bring you back into this here, a lot of, at least in the international, accounts here or responses to what's happening. A lot of talk about the status quo, the quote-unquote status quo, and calling on Israel, in other words, to maintain the status quo. Is Israel maintaining the so-called status quo in these sites? How do you just see that situation?
Well, there's a marginalization in some aspects of the status quo. The status quo was established in 1967 after the Six-Day War, and the basis was that the Muslims were free to pray and to worship in the Temple Mount, and the Jews were allowed to visit. Now, the word visit is the problematic, because visit, how can you prevent somebody who is visiting from praying, let's say? And the extremists from the Jewish side just took advantage of the fact that they could reach, and they just exerted influence and more pressure. And the problem is that sometimes, or most of the times, Israel is misread by the Palestinians, by the Arab world. I will give an example. If there is an extremist group in Israel who talks about having sacrifice on the Temple Mount like in the old days, that this is not the government of Israel. This is not the people of Israel. This is only really a fringe, very extreme, and the Arabs tend to see this as something real that is pushed by the government. It's pushed by the government because otherwise, why should the government not prevent Itamar Ben-Gvir from trying to penetrate the Temple Mount, and etc., etc. So misreading is the basis of misunderstanding the position of Israel.
Samer, I want to bring you back into this in response here, but along the lines of what I think both of you are saying here, we're looking at an Israeli government, the people in power, on shaky grounds right now in this coalition. The Palestinian Authority as well can be said to have a shaky hold on power. So is this being a ground-up driven flare-up in the conflict right now? Who appears to be in charge of where this is going?
Well, I think the political leadership on both sides have a responsibility. And I think, first of all, the Palestinian leadership is irrelevant. Now it is totally disconnected from the Palestinian street. They have no influence. They have no control of whatsoever. 17 years of self-employment. Abbas is there, and he has rejected and cancelled elections. And this is creating a crisis of leadership on the Palestinian side. On the Israeli side, the political leadership is a coward leadership, a leadership that only cares about counting the members of the Knesset that are still supporting the coalition, and they don't care about counting the innocent victims on both sides. Dealing with the Palestinian question as only a security issue, leaving the police or the Shin Bet just to deal with it, is cheating the people, cheating the public opinion. The Israeli leadership should be courage enough and come to the Israeli public and say the Palestinian question is political and we have no other choice. We need to make some political compromise. If not, we will keep losing victims from here and there. We will keep using violence because occupation is violence, and the Palestinians will keep resisting with more violence. We will not be out of this circle of violence for the rest of our lives, for generations. Not dealing with the question now on a political basis is just transferring the problem to the coming generations, and this is not leadership. This is an act of cowards. So we have lack of leadership on both sides. I would like to mention something about whether
in brief, please.
Yes, whether changing the status quo or trying to demolish Al-Aqsa and building the temple is an act of minority. Yes, but we have learned as Palestinians that also minorities can impose their agenda on the governments, like the wave of settlements, for example. What's happening in the West Bank? The whole settlement industry started because a minority has imposed its influence, and the right wing, the extreme right wing minority in Israel is capable to influence the whole political system in Israel. We have learned this, and we can see it in practice. It happens. So the peace of the Palestinians
Samer, thank you for joining us.
Correct and is valid.
Appreciate your time here, and both of you, Samer Sinijlawi in Jerusalem, Dr. Jacques Derrida, thank you for both bringing strong sentiments to the subject here. Certainly a story not going anywhere for a while.